This is a set I've been looking for some time. This is the third Chimarra issue showing the Greek king. Chimarra was one of the centers of opposition to the newly formed state of Albania. There were three towns, especially in northern Epirus, that were incorporated into the new state of Albania, and they really didn't want to be. And so for a brief time, they had an autonomous country, autonomous Epirus. They attempted to form their own state, which would be separate from Albania. But what they really wanted was to be part of Greece. And this issue shows the current Greek king, Constantine I. This man had only recently become king. He became king in 1913 when his father, King George, was assassinated. George had been on the throne for 50 years and then was killed by some crazy person for no apparent political reason. Anyway, then Constantine took over. This Constantine I was, I believe, the grandfather of Prince Philip of Great Britain, the late husband of Queen Victoria. Queen Elizabeth, sorry. These were printed in an interesting way. You notice that there are, for each color, there are two stamps of the same color, plus one additional stamp that was printed separately. So, wait a minute. No, I'm sorry. There are three stamps here. You know, I'd better get my story straight here before I go on to this. What I do know is that the ones that are the same color were printed on the same sheet. That, you know, two different denominations printed on the same sheet in the same pass with the same ink. And so there exist, you know, pairs separated by a gutter where you have two denominations, say the 2 and the 10, or the 20 and the 1, or this pair, the two blue ones. The additional colors, this green and this orange color, I believe were printed separately, but I'll give you a footnote on that later. You notice that the cancellations are all the same date, 17 October 1914. Where you can see them. You can see they're all 17, 17, 17. The stamps were issued on October 10th, 1914, and they were only in use for less than a month. The Greek army moved into the territory of North Epirus in November of 1914 and started issuing their own stamps. And the citizens of Epirus who wanted to be part of Greece were perfectly happy with this Greek occupation. That was what they were aiming for in the first place. So at that point, the autonomous state of Epirus more or less collapsed, and they just accepted the Greek occupation, hoping that the territory would be incorporated in Greece after the war. In fact, the Greeks and the Italians had a deal that the Italians would support the Greeks in their ambition to take over Epirus if the Greeks would support the Italians' wish to take over a town on the coast of Albania, Valona, one of the larger towns on the coast. But in the end, neither of them prevailed. The former boundaries that had been set up before the war were reestablished after World War I in the peace conference. The fact that they're all the same date would suggest that these are probably favor cancels. In other words, somebody put these on a sheet of paper and just canceled them all, and they didn't actually pass through the mail.
My set has different dates. I was reading the 14 as the bottom. That's the year. It looks like they're all the 15th, the ones that I got.
Okay, very good. That is what I expected. So yours were done on the 15th, mine were done on the 17th. It would really be great to have one of these stamps, one or more, on cover. I don't believe I've ever seen that offered.
Huh.
They're hard enough to find, either either mint or used as stamps. I don't believe I've ever seen in any auction that I've looked at the stamps on cover.
The placement of the cancellation makes it look like it was done purposefully. It's not random enough to be.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, there is some variation, but it's a little bit, they're a little bit too regular.
Yeah.
Somebody went along and probably had piles of these things. There were not that many of these printed. I believe something like about 50 sheets of each stamp.
This date is after the First World War has broken out.
That's right.
Does that have anything to do with the Italians cooperating with the Greeks?
I don't remember the date. They made an agreement that the two prime ministers, the Italian and the Greek prime ministers, made an agreement about this. And I don't know what the date of that agreement was. I
Yeah.
can tell you that at the time that the Greeks invaded North Epirus and started issuing their own overprinted stamps, which then replaced these, Greece was technically a neutral country. Greece was not in the war. In fact, the Greeks were rather strongly divided over the question of whether they should take part in the war. As a neutral,
which side?
Pardon?
And on which side?
Yes, well, true. The king of Greece at the time, Constantine, this man, was closely related to the Germans. His wife, Sophia, was the sister of the Kaiser. He had studied in Greece, in Germany rather, and had gone to German military training. So he was extremely reluctant for Greece to get involved fighting against the Germans.
Yeah.
And on the other hand, the prime minister, Venizelos, was strongly in favor of Greece joining on the side of the Allies. So there was a national schism, and actually two separate governments set up briefly in 1916. Well, that's a longer story that I won't continue with. Let me just say one more thing about the involvement of the Greeks in this territory. The reason Greece as a neutral power was called on by the great powers of the time to occupy this area was that there was a great deal of fighting going on between the Greeks, who did not want to be part of Albania, and the Albanians, who wanted the territory. So there was basically chaos and a lot of fighting going on in various places. And the great powers asked the Greeks to take over, even though they were not yet in the war per se, on either side. They were asked to pacify this territory.